All right. We are live, I think. Hello, friends. Welcome back to SerenityOS Office Hours. Today we have guests, not just one, but two. We're here with Daniel and Brian, and we are going to be trying something new, just taking questions as usual, but answering them together. And we'll figure this out as we go, I hope. As you can imagine, I don't have a plan, but I'm sure it's going to be fine. First thing I normally do in these streams is wait for somebody to acknowledge that they can hear and see me because I'm paranoid that it doesn't work. So the moment somebody says, I can hear you, I can see you, that's when I usually start to feel confident. It works. All right. Great. So yeah, welcome Daniel and Brian.
Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Brian has been on my channel before. We did an interview, but Daniel has actually been in one of the community showcase videos.
Yeah, I have been. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's see if we have questions already. And if anybody of you two guys see a question, remind me to highlight it, by the way. Otherwise, I guess we can start with this one right here from Mati. Who asks, do you agree that the difference between professional and amateur programmer is when you write your own compiler? It is what Terry said. Any comments?
I mean, personally, I feel like people like to kind of put up these grails of like, if you know this or if you've done this, this is kind of the baseline for you're a real programmer or something, right? I don't know. I think you can make the talisman anything you want, and it doesn't really matter what it is. Any kind of sufficiently large, complex experiment kind of could be your thing. So I don't know. I don't think a compiler is very special to me, at least. Maybe that's just me, but I don't know.
I wouldn't imagine that many people have written compilers so far. So if this were the criteria, then there wouldn't be any professional programmers in the world.
Yeah, I think the boring answer is just the thing that makes a professional programmer is that somebody's paying you to write code, and that's really all there is to it. Let's see.
Does that mean that OSS programmers aren't professional?
I guess many of them, yeah, by that definition, are not professional. But many OSS programmers tend to have computer software careers on the side, right? But yeah, I would say that's like an amateur thing. But amateur is not a bad thing, though. Like even the word itself comes from amor, right? Like that you love something so much that you just do it because you love it. So I think that's a good thing. Anyway, let's take another question here. Somebody, Samwise from the Lord of the Rings universe, asking, how much of Serenity are you planning to write/rewrite in Yakt, or is it for writing apps for Serenity? Well, I don't really have a plan for how much or how little to write or rewrite. But the whole thing is just an experiment, and we're going to see what happens as we go. It's still too early to say what's going to happen with it. It can still turn out that like we end up feeling like, oh, this is just a lot more work than it's worth, or this isn't giving us the amazing benefits that we hoped for, or whatever. But I still maintain that if we don't try this, then who else is going to try something big and ambitious like this? Like, you would have to be crazy to try this. So, but I don't know. Like Brian and Daniel, you guys haven't been like poking at Yakt too much so far, other than some initial stuff. Do you guys have any intuition about like the future of like porting things to a different language, or trying to extract value by switching languages? No, no answers required.
I mean, personally, I think I like the kind of holistic approach that Serenity kind of has today, right? Where we have like kind of one thing for most things, right? And so like one language that the entire system is kind of cohesively built around. So I would like to imagine a world where Yakt is that kind of solution in the future, and we have a kind of kernel version of Yakt, or Yakt is fully usable in the kernel. Maybe I don't know. I think that's exciting, but yeah, I guess there's a lot to get figured out before we can ever see that day.
Yeah, and I think that the only reasonable thing to do is to start incrementally rewriting things. So I don't think there's any point in throwing away 3 years of work or porting it completely. So this is why I'm really happy that currently one of the focuses of Yakt is to have real good C++ interoperability and to eventually work fully with our existing libraries.
Yeah, I think that's really the killer feature that made me want to even try it in the first place. Because we looked at some other languages, but the whole idea of like, okay, well now we have to build a bridge and talk to C++ via a C bridge or something like that. That just didn't seem like a lot of fun. So, like building a language that takes C++ interop seriously means that we can sort of cheat and bypass the main trouble that other languages would give us. Of course, I'm sure that there's some obscure language out there somewhere that has C++ interop, and now somebody will write a comment about how, well, have you heard of Fulang? But anyway, but yeah, so yeah, the I agree with Brian that I think the holistic concept of Serenity is one of its core strengths, right? So in the ideal future, we can build everything using a single language with a single library, just like we have today with C++. It's just, as Daniel says, it's an incremental journey to get there. So it's a spooky project, but let's try it anyway, see what happens. All right, let's see. Here's Klinus saying something to Daniel. Yeah.
It's not like grilling, although it's super scary, but hey, whatever.
Yeah, it's all right. Let's see. And Klinus was also asking, how do we feel about CLine versus VS Code? What features of either IDE would you like to see in the other? So I don't know about you guys if you've been trying both IDEs. I've been using both recently just because we have a Yakt extension for VS Code. So it's been interesting. And I'm a lot less, like when I first tried VS Code, I thought it was sluggish and the key bindings were wrong. But once I remapped all the keys and got used to the editor, then now it's like it's just another IDE and it's fine. It seems like to me. And in some ways, it feels more helpful than CLine to me for like arbitrary languages. So if you're working in a project that has like all kinds of languages, then VS Code just seems to have sort of a solution in its back pocket. Like, hey, I see that you're editing Python. Would you like me to provide these amenities? Whereas CLion is like, well, this isn't C++, you jerk. And I feel like sometimes, I mean, maybe the greater IntelliJ ecosystem has answers to this type of stuff, but I only have CLine, so I don't know. Either of you guys using VS Code currently, or what's the status?
So let me start first then. Sorry, Brian. So I haven't really used VS Code. The few times I have, it was mainly for editing Markdown files, but for serious work in a compiled language or even a programming language at all, I haven't really tried it. So CLion is just good for me. So as you know, I'm currently hacking on LLVM, and for that, it's really helpful to have a working jump to definition and refactoring tools working out of the box without having to fiddle with any extensions. That's super important for me. I'm not the type of person that would want to spend a lot of time working on getting their development set up working correctly. So for that regard, it's really good. But I could understand why someone else would like VS Code more, where you can write arbitrary extensions much more easily than you could do with CLion.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing, so I've used the VS Code a little bit for work and for kind of personal stuff, and then CLion mostly just for Serenity past couple years. And the one thing I think that I do miss from a more kind of tightly knit IDE like CLion and like its ability to index, like the indexing in VS Code for C++ at least, it's kind of, it has a different kind of model. Like there's one feature of like CLion, like there's some hotkey, I forget what it is, like double shift or something that brings up the symbol window for like all the symbols in the project, and then you can filter that and get like very fast search across all real types. And I find myself leaning on that maybe like 99% of the time when I'm looking for code. And I've used that in other IDEs before that are kind of C++ centric, and I think that's a very powerful thing that I really wish VS Code had some sort of analog to, instead of it kind of being it relying a lot on full text search and doesn't really have the same kind of like full list of symbols that you can very quickly jump back into. That's kind of my only thing that I don't like about VS Code.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well, especially since we've been building the Yakt extension for VS Code. I kind of got to see into the sausage factory and like understand why it's like that. Like, why is VS Code kind of a bit more awkward to search with? And a problem that we ran in with is that like there's just these various language server APIs that you have to implement. So you implement like one API for auto completions and then another API for like go to definition. And all of these are sort of islands that you send it some data to the API and then it replies back. But it's entirely up to the language server to model the program. And I totally see what you mean. Like CLion builds like a coherent model of the C++ program like internally, and then it can query that in interesting ways. And that just, you don't get that with a language server, I guess. Or it's up to the language server to do fancy stuff, which we should probably do in our language server eventually. But you gotta crawl before you walk, before you run, and all that. Yep. Anyway, Daniel, you mentioned that you were working on LLVM. I just want to ask you quickly if you wanted to share a bit about what that's about.
Yeah, so this is for Google Summer of Code. My project was centered, or not was, it is centered around improving the macOS linker that LLVM is making. So this is ld64.lld. And well, currently I'm working on improving diagnostics. So for example, when you have an undefined symbol, previously it would just print at which file and what offset into that file that symbol was referenced. And one of the first things I did was to parse the dwarf inside the object file. LLVM luckily has an existing library for it, so I didn't really have to write much code to actually figure out what that function and what that offset, which line that corresponds to. And yeah, so mostly I was working on diagnostics, but I have a commit that I've been in the process of making for almost a week, which is linker optimization hints. So this is an ARM64 thing, because as you know, ARM64 has 32-bit instructions. So for example, when you have to encode a jump, it usually consists of two instructions. So first that grabs a page offset, and then the second one that grabs a specific byte within that page, because I think you only can have 23 bits of intermediate data, intermediate offsets inside an instruction. And what this optimization hint does is it marks at which point these pairs of instructions are located at. And if the linker detects that the reference symbol is close enough, then it can turn one of them into a no-op and replace the other one with one that directly fetches that address.
Okay, so it's like jump compression? basically. Branch compression.
Could be, yeah.
Well, that's very cool. I'm really glad that you got into the Summer of Code project. Like that only benefits me in a very like indirect way because I use Clang, but I don't know. It's so cool to see people in the SerenityOS community like sort of engaging with other aspects of open source and other projects and stuff like that, because it's there's a greater community as well. As much as we like to stay in our mono repo, there's a whole world outside. And Brian, do you work on any other open source projects?
Yeah, I kind of do some drive-by stuff. I maintain some stuff for fun at work. So some kind of like projects. There's a thing called Detours, which is essentially, it was a project built by Microsoft Research to do dynamic patching of binaries. So it lets you essentially like, there's a thing called in Windows binaries, there's a whole bunch of techniques essentially to patch binaries at runtime. And so Detours lets you kind of, gives you an API to go say, hey, I have this function at this name, go patch it and jump to this function instead. And so it can be used for a bunch of like useful systems programming stuff. A lot of people in the community use it for like game hacking and stuff like that. Or real hacking, I think is also a common usage. It's kind of one of those things where it's like a interesting research project, a useful thing, but also kind of a little bit dubious. And I think Microsoft folks have interesting feelings about it. Yeah, so yeah, I just try to do a bunch of stuff for fun. But yeah, Serenity has definitely been my main focus for the last couple of years. I'm really happy to see. I don't know. There was, I think maybe late 2000s, there was kind of like this linker war, right, where like Gold came out, and I don't know, I remember how old Gold is, but I saw a bunch of linker work back in the day, right, and it's kind of interesting to see kind of a resurgence of that, right, with Mold and obviously a lot of work being done in LLVM, and I really like the idea of kind of like linker diagnostics. I think linker errors were one of the more opaque things that I had to deal with when I was very early in my kind of programming journey, right? And it can be very confusing. And so I think kind of making that more accessible and obvious is really a great idea.
Very much. And I really would like to believe that this is sort of the run-up before the compiler wars start.
Yeah.
Because we had like Gold came on the scene and sort of humiliated the existing LD by being like faster and smaller, and hey, look, I can actually link Chrome on my laptop. And some projects, like some really big projects, I remember it required that you build them with Gold because they would run out of memory with GNU LD. And yeah, like we're seeing a resurgence. But I also see Rui, like the Mold author, like he's sometimes teasing on Twitter about like, I could totally make a fast C++ compiler. Like I just need 100 guys and funding. And
he has already made a C compiler, though. I think if you check out his GitHub profile, there is a C compiler.
Yeah, he made the Chibi CC, right? The supposedly very nice and educational C compiler. I haven't actually read it myself, but people say really good things about it. There's been a bunch of projects like that recently. There's also the like the actually portable executable. I don't know if you've seen this APE project where there's it's like it's a thing that builds executables that can run on any operating system by doing tricks. And you get like one file and it runs on Mac, on Windows, and on Linux. And that's pretty cool. I don't know. It's like we're in some kind of revival age for low-level hacking. I'm imagining, at least, and we'll see how that goes. But that is cool. Anyways, let me get back to questions before I forget to look for them. Let's take something easy. Oh God, there are so many things. Let's oh wait, this is how you do it. DJ Wisdom is asking, what's your opinion on file manager tab support Windows File Explorer tab support is already available for Windows 11. Ooh, what is my opinion on that? Well, for me personally, I don't think I've ever used tabs in file managers other than I remember when they added them to Finder and Craig Federighi made a big deal. And then I tried them out and I was like, all right, I don't want to use this because it's easier to just have two windows and drag between them for me personally, other than I guess the idea being that you can drag from your window to like the little tab and then it pops open and then you drop it in there. But some people say it's great. So I don't want to knock the thing. It seems like a worse user experience for me personally. But I also never used like Norton Commander or anything like that back in the day. I know some people swore by that thing where you have like a 2-up view, right, where two separate directories open. I think I would be more interested in doing something like that in our file manager, like supporting having two directories open with a separate location bar for each. That feels to me like much more of a power user direction and maybe like a better fit for Serenity. And then you can go further and further with that. Like you can like have a terminal that folds out at the bottom, and I don't know what else.
I mean, I do see the utility in it, but I always thought that kind of view, at least when you put it in like at a terminal, it makes a little bit of sense. But like with a GUI, it looks a lot like those pictures of like a programmer designed this UI kind of thing, right? Where it's kind of just like things slapped together.
Yep.
I have a bunch of like coworkers that are really like passionate about like this is the way I deal with my files, and then you kind of use one of those kind of Midnight Commander type tools. But yeah, I never was able to get into it myself. I think there is kind of maybe for the tab stuff, like I think there might be some happy medium where like you're a power user where like you're dealing with like a lot of photos or like doing a lot of file management, but you're not like a power user to the level of like I want to go jump to a terminal. And maybe there might be like some niche where like tabs make sense there. But yeah, I never have found a utility in tabs for my file explorer either. I tried it once or twice with like third-party file managers or like in Linux, and I never really caught on.
Yeah, it seems like the problem that it's really solving is I have a lot of file manager windows, right? And maybe that happens to a lot of people, but I don't tend to hoard those as much. I do, like everybody else, I tend to hoard browser tabs, of course. Although I know that there are some strange people who have like 4 or less tabs open ever, which is a discipline I can't believe exists, but it's really impressive. But to the question from DJ Wisdom, I guess my opinion is it feels like it wouldn't hurt anybody to have it. It's one of those things where like we have it in the browser, but if you're not actually creating tabs in our browser right now, then we don't even show a tab bar. Like for a single tab browser window, there's no tab bar, so there's no UI cost. So if you could come up with a solution for file manager where you can not pay for the tab bar if you're not using it, and if somebody feels passionate about like, oh, a tab bar would really enhance my usage, I would be happy to entertain prototypes of that. I guess that's generally like my policy on anything is like if you can accommodate a legitimate use case that maybe not everybody has, but if you can do so in such a way that doesn't punish or like incur attacks on everybody else, then that's 10 times nicer and more likely that we would want to do it. Let's see. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, Mati was asking, what do we think about integrating Yakt to CLI command line? The command line interface command line, like the Temple OS shell. You have a lot of Temple OS related questions, my friend. But yes, the Temple OS shell has some kind of a JIT compiler, I remember. So personally, I would love to have a REPL for Yakt. That would be an awesome thing. When I was playing with Swift, I really liked that there's a Swift REPL that you can just fire up and you can start typing out a program and mess around with, like just trying little pieces of code and like building up a program sort of incrementally. In this way, that's like the way that I originally learned programming back in the day, was using a REPL like a basic REPL on Microsoft DOS. But the unfortunate reality of Yakt right now is that it's a bit slow for that. So a REPL would be kind of frustrating because we have to go through a C++ compiler. But once maybe the infrastructure is a little bit better on that side, it's something that we could do. But as far as building a shell on top of Yakt, like having it as an interactive shell language, I don't know. You mentioned like holistic systems, Brian. Like, do you think that should logically also extend to like the shell itself could offer that language?
That's what I kind of interpreted it like, I guess. That like the shell would be a REPL and kind of, I don't know. I've obviously like PowerShell tries to do that kind of thing in Windows, but I think it's a good idea, but there's limited utility in like the real world, just because like not very often are you going to want to say like process a bunch of files with your own custom code kind of thing, and it's often easier to write it in like a more succinct language like normal shell, like bash or ali shell, whatever we call our shell. And I don't know,
The bug-free shell.
yeah. No bug shell. I find it hard sometimes to kind of connect my terminal shell brain to my programmer brain and kind of join those worlds. I kind of see them separate sometimes.
So there are a couple really good shell features that aren't obvious how you would do that in Yakt. So for example, how would you do piping? So for that, maybe you would have some filter methods and stuff, but then you would have to start implementing functions as first-class citizens and everything. So if anyone wants to do it, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I know if JT were awake, then we would hear all about New Shell, which tries to do that and with a respectable effort. And I think it's good that people are exploring in that area. But I always find, at least for me, when I try using these things, I discover just how simple my shell usage is and like how dumb my problems I'm trying to solve with the shell. And like I don't need to get fancy, but for people that do, sure. So let's take a more abstract question here from German WTB saying, how do we currently feel about the rate of community growth? I'm going to let other people answer that first so I don't taint the answers. So if you guys would comment.
I've been kind of focused on other things a little bit right now, just like with my personal life. So I've been kind of a little bit out of touch with what's happening. But as like looking at it as a maintainer, like looking at pull requests a little bit on, when I have time and stuff, it seems like I think Yakt has kind of taken us on a little detour, right? And kind of the focus is a lot on there, and kind of there's the community has slowed down a little bit with like PRs and feature stuff. I mean, people are still working on things, but it's not kind of like the height it was like crazy at one time, right? The amount of stuff happening. And it's true of any project though. It have ebb and flows, right? But I don't know. I think Yakt may have kind of had a little bit of an impact there, with kind of people maybe thinking, hey, we should go like maybe there might be a hesitation to kind of go write a bunch of new code, right? If they think that, hey, this is going to be the new thing that we're going to be using. I think that's like my only observation. I don't really have any feelings. I think everything's fine. Yeah.
Oh yeah, of course. I think you're right also that like it definitely made an impact. And you saw like there was a decrease in activity in the Serenity repo, but like at the same time it was sort of a huge increase, of course, in the new repo, and a bunch of new people joined because they were interested in programming language stuff. So we did grow a bunch from that. I think like at least the Discord community has grown like by another 1,000 users or almost since we added the language. Although I'm not exactly sure about that figure, but it keeps growing. Like, it's weird. We have this channel where you can see like the people joining, and I don't look in there every day, but sometimes I go in and it's like, oh, there's 20 new people today. And it just makes me think back to the IRC days when we were in this little IRC channel. We had like 160 users or something at peak. And the idea that like 20 new people join in the same day now, the scale is so different. And Daniel, I don't remember exactly when you joined us originally. Like, you've been around for quite a while too.
Yeah. I joined, I think, right after the Discord server was created. So my first PR was in May 2021, so more than a year ago now. And yeah, it's been awesome seeing how the number of people on the Discord server grow. It's absolutely amazing. And going back to what happened to the SerenityOS repo now that Yakt exists, I think this week has been a more active one than the previous weeks. So at the end of May, I was a bit worried that development would completely grind to a halt. But since then, we've had amazing achievements. Like, I think the JVM port was merged 5 days ago, and I think no one has ever managed to do a port of that scale previously.
You mean in Serenity or
Yeah,
in the whole world?
Well, to be fair, the Haiku guys are porting Firefox and GIMP. I think that happened a couple months back, that they managed to get the X11 emulation libraries working to a point where you can edit images inside emulated X11 apps. But for us, I think it was one of the biggest achievements in our ports repo. And of course, with it, all the incremental progress that has been being made since the end of February has been amazing. So our low-level libraries got a bunch of new features, and the dynamic loader had a bunch of bug fixed, and we're faster now. So it's awesome to see the low-level stuff and the ports growing again.
Yeah, I think you're right that like there was this scare almost for a while there. People saw like, hey, they're making a language, now they're going to stop using C++, and I should just I guess people were sort of taking a step back and seeing, should I even continue working on this? And now maybe they just got back into it and forgot about being worried or something. But I think the thing that I really like about the way that we're doing Yakt is exactly what we talked about earlier with the interop, that it's designed so that you can incrementally replace C++. Like, you don't even have to do a whole library at a time. You don't even have to replace a whole class at a time if you want to. Like, you can replace an individual function in a class and port things incrementally like that. And I think people just need to realize that like C++ is not going away anytime soon. It's going to be around as our base language for quite some time. And yeah, but anyway, to the outermost question, like, how do we feel about the rate of community growth? I feel good about it. Like, for me personally, sometimes I get a little bit worried when numbers start to race too much, like when lots and lots of people are coming in, because the way I typically notice that is, well, with office hours, for example, where people come and ask a bunch of questions that I imagine that everybody knows the answers. And then I realize, wait a minute, they're new people. And sometimes I get a lot of like newbie questions, and it's lovely to have new people, but that's the thing for me that makes me notice that there's new people coming. And sometimes it's nice when it just flatlines a little bit, and we can coast on the community that we've built, and like, all right, so let's just do our stuff for a bit and then get ready for another wave of new people. But it's lovely that so many people want to participate, and that so many people are having fun with it. So I'm very happy with the growth of the community, and if it goes too fast, we find ways to slow down, and if it slows down too much, then we find ways to speed it up. Anyway, let's take a new question. Oh wait, here's a comment from Fact Checker Network Exception saying we gained 560 new users. See, so I lied by almost 2x. That's my marketing brain. Yeah, so 516 new users on Discord since the blog post got released. Thank you, Network Exception, for fact-checking my marketing BS. And let's get back to... Oh, here's something. So from Berkai asking, what was the downside of not graduating from university, if there is any, for you? And I guess both of you guys... Well, Brian, at least you've got a degree, don't you? Yeah, and Daniel doesn't because you're not even finished with high school?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Just fact-checking here, the situation here. Okay, so I guess then we have three very different perspectives here. So my perspective is that the main downside was that that I perceive now, but perhaps I was ignorant about earlier, but like it seems to me that when you go to university, you get very broad range of exposure to computer science. Like a computer science education shows you all these different things. Like you learn about all these data structures and algorithms, and you got to do all these different exercises and things that you might not expose yourself to if you're completely self-taught, because you just don't end up on those paths because you're choosing what to do. So maybe, at least in my case, like I always chose what was interesting, and I've sometimes felt like I wish I would be more well-rounded. I wish I knew more data structures, so I would have more of a library to choose from. But other than that, like career-wise, it has never been a problem for me, at least, because it is a very like open-minded industry, at least the parts of it that I've seen. I'm sure that there are, government contractors and stuff where they're more strict about credentials, but in the sort of consumer software and web area of things, you can get a job without paperwork for sure. But I would be interested to hear your perspective, Brian, for example, like if you have what you feel about this from actually having an education. Like what was the benefit of it, and do you feel any downside?
I think it was useful in the sense that, kind of like you're saying, that like you get a little bit of taste of different things, right? Like I might not know about, right? So like one thing that I think I would have never probably looked into or kind of learned about is like computational theory, like finite automata and stuff like that, like kind of core kind of like ideas of computing, right, that are kind of useful if you're doing certain problems. A lot of the time they're completely useless and kind of like not really applicable to most problems, I mean, in the real world. But if you're doing like regular expressions or something, right, like there's a very definitive way of like looking at regular expressions from a kind of computer science perspective, right? And knowing that kind of thing can help you with like parsers and compilers and stuff like that as well, right? So I think kind of that exposure is good and kind of lets you maybe find things that you are interested in, and then you can go dig deeper on your own or go dig deeper in class. But much like yourself, like I interview lots of people for work and for jobs, and I don't think in this point in the industry, like a degree is part of it, right? But it's not like the whole picture, and everybody obviously can do amazing things without a degree. It doesn't really play as big of a part as I think people think it does. So yeah, I often kind of question what my education was about, or like, was it useful? And I think it was, I guess. I definitely, I like to kind of like you're saying, like I'd go do what I'm interested in. I'm not going to expose myself to a bunch of other things just for fun. I mean, I want to, but like I probably won't follow up. I'll like go buy a book, I'll download a PDF. I'll be like, I will read this thing about this niche topic because I should further my knowledge or something, right? But I read the first paragraph and then, oh, what's this over there, and get distracted or something. So I think kind of having that formal setting was good for me in that way. But
yeah, fair enough. And Daniel, are you applying to university already, or how does that work?
No, I have 1 year left in high school, so I'm gonna be applying to university in half a year maybe, and I would definitely love to go to university because I feel that I currently have a very narrow knowledge, and it would be better for me if I could branch out and see what the world of computer science and programming is about. So, so currently, what I know is either from the things I've learned from you all while being in the Serenity Discord, or creating pull requests here, or things that I have read. But of course, that's far from the experience you would get when a teacher who actually knows, a professor who understands how it should be taught, and the way things are layered on top of each other. Because when you start right at the most difficult things, or at the most low level things, then maybe you can have a better experience understanding these abstractions that are layered on top of that.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's funny that you say that you have such a narrow skill set or whatever, because when I was your age, my skill set was drinking beer and playing games. And in the great scheme of things, I feel like you've already like acquired a very impressive skill set, and I think university will be absolutely great for you, because you will be able to branch out and like learn a million more things, and find out what you really like. So it seems to me like if somebody has the passion and the drive to participate in academia, then why not do it? The reason I didn't do it was because I just couldn't get myself to sit down and pay attention. That was really my fundamental problem. It's not that I didn't believe in education or anything like that. I was just like physically unable to relax and focus. So I guess, yeah. So no, go ahead.
One other kind of thing I did forget was that my education also did expose me to academia in some kind of interesting ways, where I was able to do like undergraduate research and a bunch of projects, like all in kind of computer science, and learn about or like internships and stuff. So I think that was another good thing, is like it kind of put you in a door of like, without if you're not working in like a educational environment, you're probably not gonna be interested in going and doing like independent research for a university or something, right? It kind of, it's a separate world, so you might not even know about those opportunities. So I think it does open up those kind of things. So I was able to learn about like the application of computer science to kind of the material science or other kind of things, and I think that was very useful in my career, and just for learning in general. That like, I think you can be very narrow-minded in like your nerdiness, right? Anybody, right? That like computers are the cool thing, but I think there's a whole world of like applying computers to real world problems and helping people is also a whole nother thing. And there's a lot of interesting work to be done there, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's find a new question. Oh, this one is special. So Well is asking, why is my head looking swollen? Am I all right? It's just my head, bro. I just look like this, all right? Maybe it's swollen, but not more than usual.
I can't imagine typing that into my computer and pressing send. That's like...
Anyway. Let's see. So Gabriel is asking, what are some good criteria to consider when looking for open source projects to contribute to? Well, that's a broad question with many possible answers. I think In my case, I would say projects that are interesting to you personally are great to contribute to. And if you're coming, like, it depends a lot if you're coming at it from a learning perspective or like a resume padding perspective, because I know a lot of people, they get told that, hey, you should contribute to open source to pad out your resume and these things, and then they're looking for stuff to do. I don't know what to tell those people, but if you're looking to have fun and learn stuff, then just pick whatever is interesting. And I guess maybe it's not entirely true what I said, that I don't know what to tell them, because I would probably tell them go and work on corporate open source projects. Because if you want to learn to work in an open source environment, you can participate in stuff like Swift, WebKit, GCC, Apache, the sort of Linux, obviously the biggest example, where you would be like working together with other people who are in an office somewhere, or nowadays at home somewhere, working professionally. And I think just being around a professional environment can teach you a lot. But it really depends on your intention. Like, why do you want to contribute? Because I guess it's always a bit strange to me when I hear somebody wants to contribute to open source, but that's the extent of how far they've thought about it. Like, you don't have a specific problem that you're trying to solve, or you don't have a specific project that you like. You just know that you want to contribute to open source. And then first you have to figure out what it is that you want to do, I guess. But since I have both of you here, and both of you came to a project that I started, what were you looking for? Like, what was the whole genesis of you arriving here with me today?
Oh no, should I start? All right. Well, for me, it was mostly an accident. So I started by really small contribution, and then I just got sucked into the thing, mostly because I made a bunch of bugs in that first contribution, and then I had to spend some time fixing those. I think you may remember that I messed around with the TTY system as one of my first contributions, and suddenly a bunch of these line editing tricks in the shells stopped working, and then I was pained. I had to come back and try to figure out what I messed up, and I think by just that I got to 10 commits maybe, and at that point, when you have 10 commits, you start to feel some sort of attachment to the community, and I never left. But the way I found SerenityOS was obvious, like I think as most people do, through your videos and JS. So, but at that moment, I wasn't particularly looking for to contribute. But I saw one of your hacking videos. I was bored. I think I was listening to a literature lesson, and I thought that, no, I have 10 million better things to do. Let's start messing with the kernel for a bit. And that was my story.
I think I first saw Serenity on Lobsters, the kind of like Hacker News, like one of those websites like news or something. And I think it was one of the posts, I don't remember, that you were doing a lot of blog posts kind of early on, I think. And then I started watching some YouTube videos, I think. And then that was right around the time where you did like the first kind of Hackerman series, where like kind of doing security stuff. And I don't know, I do some security based work at my job, and I'm interested in that kind of stuff, but I don't get to do a ton of it. So I was kind of drawn to that, I guess, and kind of it seemed like a unique opportunity of like a small but functional code base that does like a bunch of interesting stuff. Like there's real programs and stuff. And I thought I could learn or have some real impact, I guess. And that was kind of what drew me to be involved. And
yeah, but you were not looking for anything, I guess.
No, I mean, it was also the kind of, I think the beginning of, it was a time, I think it was like around the start of COVID, or like it kind of coincided somehow. So I think I was also like sitting at home a lot or something, or like had like a lot of sitting in front of the computer time kind of stuff. And I think maybe not consciously, but I think subconsciously maybe I was looking for something to kind of spend my time on. So, but yeah, I have kind of during my life, I've wanted to contribute to a bunch of projects, right? And I feel like I spent a lot of time finding projects to contribute to and less time actually contributing to those projects, which I think is like an easy trap to some kind of new folks could potentially fall into. But yeah, I think your advice was sound and good.
Yeah. So, okay. So you spent a lot of time looking for projects.
Yeah, or just like finding something new and kind of having my attention grabbed by that, and kind of in the moment being like, oh, I could go work on this, I could contribute to this, and kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know, it's easy to get kind of pulled in by that thing, I think, but you only have so much time and attention span, so I think it's kind of better to be more intentional with your time and contributions.
Fair enough. Let's see. There are so many questions. Bum, bum, bum. I guess let's take. Well, from Mikolesh asking, is there anything from SerenityOS ecosystem which is usable outside of it? So that's a good question. There is a bunch of stuff you can totally compile for other operating systems. We use, like, obviously we're building on Linux, most of us. Some people use other platforms, but Linux is the main one. And a lot of our tools compile for Linux because we use them during the build process. And recently, we even have the browser engine up and running on Linux as well. And the fact that the operating system, the Serenity operating system, is like POSIX-ish for the most part, makes it really quite easy. Bar some build system shenanigans, but like it's pretty easy to port stuff to other Unixes, I would say. And I guess the thing against using it outside is that everything in Serenity is kind of interconnected. There isn't like, if you take out one part, it usually brings with it everything else. Like you try to take out the browser engine, and now you also have our graphics engine and our font library and our networking request handler, and like everything kind of comes along in a big dependency blob. And because of that, it's not a great fit for like, oh, you take like this one thing out of Serenity and try to plug it into your Linux system. What you end up doing is you take this like gentle blob of 30 things out of Serenity and maybe get it running standalone on Linux. But it's something that comes up every now and then. Like, what if you would take something on? What if something on Serenity would become so undeniably useful for other people that there would be a strong enough force to sort of separate that and or build some kind of abstraction that would allow it to integrate with libraries and other systems? But that just hasn't really happened yet. Although maybe libjs is the closest thing. I know that somebody used it as an embedded JavaScript engine in like a Minecraft bot or something I saw a while ago.
I mean, but it is kind of exposed via, what's that thing called, like ESView or something, where you can install all the different engines side by side now.
Yeah,
I think Eden got that merged, I think. So that's kind of like one of the first obvious things. I thought also, I guess the shell. I think Ali uses the Serenity shell as his everyday shell, and
as he should. Yeah.
So you can certainly use that as like a real piece of software outside of the system.
Yeah, that's true. I guess, yeah, like the lower level stuff, like shells and command line stuff, it's kind of pretty easy to separate out, whereas anything graphical becomes more involved.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I still imagine that at some point the browser thing will reach, I don't know, it will reach some sort of level of quality where people will say, wait a minute, well, I don't want to use Serenity, but I want to have this thing on Linux. And maybe maybe we can actually do the effort of like building a Linux UI for it and hooking up everything. It seems like something that will inevitably happen if we keep improving it.
There was the SDL libgui port, right? Where somebody was
right.
That was kind of an interesting step in that direction a little bit.
Yeah, the thing that Philip was working on. I saw him on Discord yesterday, I think, lamenting that he had upgraded to like the latest Mac OS and now Serenity doesn't build anymore. And yeah, but maybe he'll get that back on track. That would definitely be cool. And I don't know, do you guys have interest in that sort of work, like bringing Serenity components to your host platform, or are you more into the like closed ecosystem type development?
I think it can help and aid. Like sometimes there's a tool you want to use or something that's not available for Serenity. Instead of having to go port it and spend kind of a day on a side quest, I can go just use the tool directly and kind of might be able to make some progress on a bug. I've enjoyed that for some of like the host and like build stuff. I was able to do that. I think it's interesting. I think once you kind of get the momentum going, I think the community would probably be pretty interested as well. But I'm not super passionate about it myself personally, though.
Yeah, although I will say that like you can spend a day porting the thing, or you can do the Serenity way, which is to spend a month rebuilding it yourself.
Yeah.
That's the correct way of doing it, obviously. Let's see. Abhishek says, well, hello, friends. Whoa, too many guests. Well, so what? We're here. Deal with it. Let's see. Dex is asking, what's a topic in some niche software categories that would be worth exploring in other categories? For example, thinking about how immediate mode GUI was inspired by game development techniques. Okay, so like what is sort of a niche software trick that is commonly associated with like one category of software that you could apply elsewhere, I guess? I don't know, nothing comes to mind like immediately like that, but I'm sure that I know that both of you have like specialized domains. Maybe you know some trick that we could bring elsewhere. I like, yeah, no, go ahead if you've had some.
One thing I spend a lot of my time in a debugger looking at like postmortem crashes. And so one thing that I think is really powerful that we do at work is we have these kind of in-memory diagnostic ring buffers, and we log like very important errors or kind of changes to the system, fundamental things in kind of these ring buffers. And then we have kind of automated debugger scripts to go to extract them and kind of present the data. And so it essentially gives you like a flight recorder, like you would have it on like an airplane or something, that kind of logs these very important events or kind of catastrophic things that might happen. And then you have access to those after the crash, right? So a lot of times the crash happens, but the actual error cascaded long ago, right? And so you're missing that information. So I think, I don't know, I'm personally, it's like a little bit of a cliche, but like for me at like work and stuff, but I'm super into ring buffers. I really like ring buffers as like a diagnostic mechanism, and I think they're very underutilized by the industry, and I think they could be used a lot more.
Sure, we can find a use case for ring buffers, Brian. We'll think of something.
Well, and does it really matter for Serenity because you can go like edit the code and go reproduce the bug like immediately in like 5 seconds. But if you are shipping software across the world and you only get something back once a month or something, right? It helps a lot to get more introspective.
But I think even then, even with Serenity, like right now, the system is typically short-lived. Like any session is typically kind of short-lived. But once you get to the point where you have like sessions that last weeks, months, whatever, having a way to step backwards through errors is going to be relevant for us too. It's just this way that we're developing the system where like everybody focuses on the thing that's interesting, it does mean that stability often happens like in a secondary fashion, I guess.
Yep.
I was going to say to this question, like for myself, coming from a very browser-focused background, I think one thing that I really like that browsers do, at least in recent years, is process separation, which I know it doesn't originate from browsers. Like it originally, I guess, started with like SSH daemons and mail servers like Qmail had process separation. But I do feel like process separation is an absolutely awesome technique for just creating hard security boundaries between different parts of the same program. And the way we use it in Serenity is pretty neat. Like we have all of these like user space service daemons that talk to each other and coordinate. Even stuff like, oh, I want to open a file. Well, the file server will open a dialog for you and let you choose a file. And um, that allows us to sandbox file access to just that service daemon and that sort of stuff. I feel like that's basically worth exploring anywhere. I feel like process separation, anytime that it doesn't get in the way of critical performance and it doesn't like complicate the hell out of things, is probably worth exploring. And
a nice kind of caveat of that as well is like you kind of automatically get these nice little like separated chunks of the code base, right? Like it kind of architects itself a little bit, right? You don't have to kind of be as intentional because the code just kind of falls out in the correct format because you're separating things anyway logically, so the code gets separated as well. And I kind of like that pattern in Serenity.
Yeah, very much. And it's interesting, like the vertical integration in Serenity sort of allows this thing to happen in the first place. Like it would be so hard to replicate this pattern in a Linux environment, for example, because how are you going to get all of these apps to like talk to the same file server? It's just hard to do. And even platforms like macOS and Windows, at least from my perspective as a primarily as a user, it seems like they struggle to get consistent implementation of these things and convince everybody to use them. And it's so nice, I feel like, that we just have the mono repo and everybody's in the mono repo. And if you're outside, sucks for you. Like you're not gonna, we're gonna break you. And that just allows us to, I don't know, it allows us to iterate on architecture in ways that are just not practical outside of that environment.
I think this idea is kind of orthogonal to the idea of microkernels. So I think what other operating systems might be trying to do is creating these very very small, low-level stuff, but then try to port all the existing huge monolithic pieces of software on top of that. And I think this is maybe one of the reasons why we shouldn't even be trying to looking at microkernels, because our model makes more sense for us because we have still a pretty nice and packaged kernel. It's not going into huge with all sorts of extensions and dynamically loaded modules and things, and we'd rather focus on making sure that the applications behave well, and instead of making a kernel that is resistant of all the low-level libraries crashing and doing weird things. So our model of security is one level higher than those, and it allows us to write, I think, more beautiful code and code that's easier to understand.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I haven't worked extensively in a microkernel environment, so I don't know how it's really like once it matures, but it just seems to me like that's a lot of effort for relatively small benefit. Like you build a microkernel and great, now you have a microkernel, but and your kernel is split up into these chunks. But what about the rest of your system? Just like you say, like you get a microkernel and then you have like Chromium on top of that, or Firefox or whatever. Which, yeah, I much prefer our approach of like the very fine-grained user space composition of services, I guess. There are probably more services that we could sort of factor out, by the way, that we just haven't thought of. Like when we did that file server separation, like put file dialogues into its own thing, it originally seemed like, oh, this is kind of too much, I thought. But now that it's up and actually kind of working, it feels like, oh, this is very reasonable. Like, why wouldn't you delegate the task of IO or opening files and browsing the file system to a different process? But it's always hard to take that first step. Like, you have something that works fine in a in process context, and then you're like, okay, well, now I have to make this asynchronous and all of that. Anyway, let's see. We have something from Linus here. Has either of you experimented with Serenity on bare metal yet? Well, I guess that's either of you two.
I haven't. No, I did try. I almost managed to persuade a friend to install Serenity on his desktop PC. So I, up until very recently, I only had laptops, and I thought that that would be a really bad idea to start with that. But unfortunately, we didn't go anywhere with that. But it would have been cool. I think we even tried. I think we stopped when we couldn't find any serial adapters because or was maybe the hard drive bad on that PC that we tried. Anyway, we failed quite early on, unfortunately. Nothing since then.
I played around with the Raspberry Pi port, so I got that up and running and like got the UART debugging working and stuff, or UART tracing. I've tried before, like I made very small steps at like trying to get it running on my PC, but I immediately I need secure boot on my machine for work because I use my personal PC at home for work stuff, and so you can't have secure boot when you're trying to boot the Serenity kernel. So that kind of was a fork in my plan. And then I never got around to kind of setting it up on a spare PC or something. But yeah, it's definitely something I'm interested in. And it's always fun to watch people's adventures in the hardware channel and see everybody's kind of different approaches, and then inevitably having to go buy a serial card or something and find one on eBay and wait for a month for it to arrive and then make progress after that. I think that's, I enjoy it.
Yeah, I still don't have a serial cable or null modem thing, and I've painstakingly still gotten bare metal up and working on a few computers. And what I have been doing is really disgusting. But usually, what happens is that I see that it can boot, but then like the screen is black. But I can tell it like something is happening because like some light will flash, or like I see that, oh, the hard drive light is flashing. Okay, so it's reading from disk, fine. And then I go and I put in some code that will write out a file to disk somewhere in the kernel with kernel state or whatever. And then I just boot with that kernel, wait for it to write it out to disk, and then reboot the same machine into Linux, extract the file from the hard drive and see what it says. And the cycle time is like 10 minutes or something. But it's doable. I need to get one of those cables now. That does seem nice. Anyway.
You know what we should do? GDB stub, so that we could directly poke into the kernel with a debugger, maybe over the network. Once that's operational, then we could do basically anything. That would be cool, and maybe even easier than trying to port GDB. Brian, what do you think?
I mean, I think the GDB stub protocol is like fairly straightforward. I think you only have to kind of give it a couple of primitives, and then it can do a significant amount with those primitives. I think we might kind of fall into some issues because I think a lot of the time the system might fail to boot even before the network driver was even reached or something. I think a lot of the times it fails pretty early on in boot from what I've seen from folks. But I'm all for that idea. I think it would be awesome. Definitely something I've thought about before, but never had the courage to go jump in and actually try to get something working.
Maybe one thing we could do is reorganize the kernel so that network stuff comes up before we try talking to the hard drives and things like that. I don't even remember what order we do that, but it seems like we should try to get those things working first. And then also kind of maybe one thing that we do in the kernel pretty aggressively is like panic when something doesn't go our way. We could maybe have a bit more of a resilient mode for this purpose. Like, oh, I'm trying to bring this thing up. Just boot as far as you can. Like ignore hardware that like malfunctions or that you don't understand the state of. But it's been a long time since I did anything like that, so I need to get back into the swing as well.
I know that like FreeBSD, I think in other BSDs, they have like a little micro debugger stub as well, like on the console. So the kernel can actually do a little bit of debugging itself. So you can get like a little bit of a backtrace. You can get a little bit of introspection into the system on the keyboard. So like if you do crash during boot or panic, then you do have some opportunity of like salvaging some information that might help you kind of figure out what's going on. So maybe that's something else we could pursue.
Yeah, that would be a cool thing to have. Yeah. There's somebody just asking specifically about you, Brian. If you are from Indiana, USA.
Oh, that's not me.
That's probably Brandon, who was from Indiana. But we'll forward your thanks to Brandon or whoever was from Indiana. Brian is repping Seattle area, I think still, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's see. We got a question from German WTB who says, this is a bit over specific, but how do you open system binaries in the hex editor? Sue wouldn't even work. I don't know. Shall we try to do it? See what happens?
Is it because the bin folder is mounted read-only and we try to open it read-write?
That's what I'm suspecting too.
Let's see. Can you see my screen there?
Yep.
Or did I just... Okay, it's not just a preview. Okay. So what system binary would we like to open? So I guess he wants to open SU?
Sure.
That one is not readable by us, though. So, or wait, it is readable because I am in the wheel group. So wait a minute. Where are the group names? What is going on here?
Oh, no, what happened?
Is there nobody manning the wheel of this project? Okay, so let's see if we can open it up. Permission denied.
Oh,
okay.
Or is it maybe because file system access server has veiled maybe itself to just only access home? Or does hex editor not go through that?
It goes through that, but my hunch would be rather that it's trying to open it for writing. So I can imagine the hex editor does not have it doesn't fall back to read-only access.
Yeah,
I would think. So that's probably a bug. We can verify that very quickly if we just make a file here and we try to edit that. Also, this dialog should probably be skipped for command line arguments. So yeah, opening a file that we have in our home directory, that's fine. But if we make it non-writable, then it fails. Yeah. So the bug is hex editor needs to fall back to like read-only mode instead of exiting, I would say. And then also the ID program needs to learn how to print out group names. Don't know what happened here, but that's definitely not right. Do I know what groups I'm in? I don't know. What on earth? Group file looks good. All right. All right. Well, something to do after the show. Anyways, let's see. Oh, Tim with some info here. Group names may have broken from when we merged the OpenJDK port. There was a change in there that keeps group entries from leaking, but it also clears the value that was just returned. that sounds like a very likely culprit, because like the group stuff typically doesn't get touched that often. So whoever touched it last, 99% chance that broke it. So yeah, we should probably fix that. Tim, that's your signal to feel responsible if you don't mind, but otherwise somebody else will do it. Let's see.
I think it's time to core systemify it.
Yeah, that's
manage a C library wrapper.
Right, because we already have a core account for user accounts, but there isn't core group, I guess, or is there? I don't even remember if we have. I don't
think so.
Yeah, that could be a thing, right? A better API for Unix group access. Mikolash was asking what software we're using. This is software called StreamYard, streamyard.com. Not paid for by StreamYard. Let's see. Here's a question from Yuval saying, hey, I'm looking for a relatively small open source project to contribute to when I don't work on my personal projects, but I can't find anything. How can I find a good project to contribute to? This feels like a remix of an earlier question, but really just work on something that you're using. That would be my first suggestion. Like, that's the funnest, something that you use every day. If you can change anything about some software you use in your everyday life, like say that you're on the GNOME desktop or on Ubuntu or whatever you are, just make a little patch to the image viewer or the file manager or something like that that you can feel in your everyday life. That would be my 25-second tip. I don't know. I feel like we already talked so much about that, so let's look at something else. Let's see. Jessica saying, do we think we'll stick with transpiling for Yakt? TypeScript is a really good example of the strength of transpiling. Perhaps the compile performance can be addressed by utilizing C++ modules. I don't think we would stick with transpiling if we go all the way of, like, if everything becomes Yakt, then transpiling to C++ is like completely wasted extra work, right? But in the time before that, as long as we want to interop with C++, I think transpiling is the reasonable thing to do, because if you don't transpile, generating C++ compatible object files, to me, seems like a very daunting and frankly uninteresting task, because C++ is very idiosyncratic when it comes to ABI. And yeah, we don't want to implement our own C++ ABI stuff. That's why leaning on transpiling is so easy, because we just have to crap out a bunch of C++ code and let somebody else worry about it. But yeah, as I was saying, like, if the experiment goes all the way where now everything is Yakt and like the build consists of first generate all the C++, then build all the C++, at that point, obviously, transpiling is extra cost that we can eliminate by building our own something. But that's a whole project in itself. That's why I'm excited about Daniel learning about LLVM, because then, looking into the future, like 2 years from now, he will spearhead our LLVM IR lowering implementation. And, you gotta dream big and all that. I don't know. Do you guys have any thoughts on like lowering to machine code one day in the future, that sort of stuff?
I mean, I do kind of think that it's an interesting thought experiment to say like that. Would it make sense to just keep transpiling forever, and then you get the C++ compat? I mean, you can keep it for not free, right? But it's a lot easier, and kind of has a much more obvious way forward, or like kind of, I don't know, it makes sense at least.
Yeah, it does turn Yakt into an interesting product almost. Like if you build it, if you get it to the point of real maturity, it almost becomes something you could sell to a company that like, oh well, we have a big C++ code base. we would like memory safety, but that's so much work.
Yeah.
And then we would come along and say, well, here's this actually free thing you can get, where you just write in this language and then you can incrementally replace your stuff. I feel like there's probably space for that in a market somewhere, but it also feels like, at least if you look at build times right now, I've been doing some tracing of Clang, like taking the generated code from the Yakt compiler and then tracing Clang to see what it's doing. And the C++ front end in Clang is not fast. It is probably like our fault for stressing it so much with like weird templates and stuff, but we are just like getting killed. And we actually had this discussion a few times now about, should we just generate for anything that doesn't need to interop with C++, should we try to generate more C-like code, because then that could generate, we could build way faster with Clang. And that's, it's a little bit of a sad thing, but it seems inevitable that we will at least do some kind of a hybrid where for anything that needs to have API compatibility or like interop, we would do generate C++, template, nice APIs, stuff like that. And anything that's like inside of a function that doesn't need to look outside can just do like shortcuts, like poke directly into unions and struct members and whatever.
Sure.
But I don't know. Daniel, do you want to make Clang faster?
All right, Yakt bait taken, maybe, I guess, if I have time. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm not going to bait you out of your summer of code project, but
well, let's just hope there are some easy ones. So, for example, Nico worked a bit, saw that generating like checksums for binaries took long because apparently they weren't doing it in parallel. He changed 2 lines of code and now LLD is 20% faster. So maybe, hopefully, there's something like that in Clang too. Just gotta do some investigative work.
Yeah, the tracing stuff that they have is pretty nice. Like you build with the F-time trace or whatever, and then you get this dump that you can open up in a nice UI. You can see which templates it's spending all of its time instantiating. Let's see. Here's a question from Mitchell asking, how do each of you set working limits for yourself when fixing bugs in SerenityOS? Group names not showing is a good example. Usually when I'm programming my stuff, it's just yaks all the way down. I don't know. What does that mean, like working limits? Like, how do you scope your work, I guess?
I think my interpretation is like, if you're working on something and then you hit another bug, how far down the Yakt stack are you willing to go before you stop yourself, I think was my interpretation.
Okay, well, that's fair. I don't know if there's a magic number for me, like, but I think sometimes when I would watch my own videos, I notice that I stop myself from recursing too deep. I just say like, oh, no, not now. I'm not going to get distracted. So there is some discipline there, but like if I'm programming by myself, I don't say that out loud, so I don't notice it as much. But I think maybe it is a hard limit actually, like 3 layers down or something like that. I don't know. Do you guys tend to follow the stack as deep as it goes? Or do you also like punk out?
I think on Serenity, I normally just follow it, just because I'm doing it for fun, right? And I don't really have any deadlines or nobody's depending on me for anything, right? So I normally, if I see it, I will investigate just to kind of give it a look to see if there's like anything obvious that's going on. But yeah, I kind of wish I was more disciplined in that way, though. I think I do kind of spend a lot of time doing things and kind of doing investigations that maybe throw away or kind of never come to fruition. So I think it's a good skill to kind of be able to limit yourself and be cognizant of your time and how you're using it.
Well, not sure. So I think I like debugging. So for me, the interesting part is not writing new code, but rather trying to fix old code and trying to figure out how it can be manipulated in weird and interesting ways. So for me, it's just yaks all the way down. And I absolutely enjoy when someone Yakt baits me. So I think my latest contribution to Serenity was trying to figure out why I worked with Tim on this one, trying to figure out why the GNU linker didn't work. Turns out it was a bug in scanf somehow, and had to uh, click through all of the GNU LD code base, add debug prints everywhere, and just try to figure out what this poor program does. And it was, I think, one of the best experiences I've had so far, because I I spent 4 or 5 hours learning about a completely new code base that I previously didn't know anything about. It's a cool experience.
Yeah, it's funny that you say it's scanf, because like I remember when I first originally ported GNU LD to the system, and like scanf was the big troublemaker even back then. And a couple of the other like APIs in libc that normal programs, like if you write a program today, you're never going to use these APIs like scanf, like f ungetc to like unget a character from a file stream, which is used liberally in LD. And it's kind of funny how those certain programs just exercise this weird dark corner of the C library. And you think that your C library is nice and stable, and then you just hit one of those dark pockets where things aren't exactly right. And I was actually thinking the other day, I know that they have this Unix certification thing where you pay like $100,000, and then they give you a test suite, I think. And then if you pass the test suite, then you're officially Unix. And I was just having this idle thought the other day, like, it'd be nice to get that test suite. Like, could we crowdfund the 100K just to get the test suite? Or maybe that thing is available somewhere. I don't know.
I tried to find it before. I couldn't find any copy of it anywhere. I think that the open group probably guards it pretty.
I guess they do, yeah. But isn't that so weird?
Yeah.
Like, oh, it's the secret thing that they have at the open group.
Yeah. There has to be some like open source version, I imagine. Like there's enough random operating systems looking for POSIX compatibility that it has to be a project, right? Like it seems.
Yeah. Unless everybody has exactly this thought process.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, there has to be one. I bet somebody else did it. But yeah.
Well, there are some things that exercise POSIX things really well. I think one of these long-standing Yakts is, I don't remember its name. It's a port system, package source, or PKGSRC, which stuck on some shell things, and I followed that journey really closely, and how I think it earned the person porting it 30 or 40 commits just to fix all sorts of weird stuff and add all the POSIX flags. But one thing is for sure, if we want it to be POSIX, we would have to have a POSIX shell, and I don't think Ollie would like it too much.
Yeah, I can just feel Ellie being upset that you just even said that. No, we've talked about POSIX, having a POSIX shell in the past, and you know, it's nice to have a usable shell that is friendly to use, but at the same time, there's also the reality that there is a huge library of scripts that just expect you to be a POSIX shell. So I don't know, like we have all kinds of POSIX utilities in the system that implement POSIX behaviors, but we haven't been caring about the shell for that. And maybe one day we'll start doing it. But I don't know, like the whole idea to be POSIX compatible is not entirely locked down in the first place. You know, it's not like explicitly a project goal. It's more like a fluffy project goal. Like, hey, it's kind of fun to do POSIX compatibility patches. Let's just keep doing them. I guess if we shelled out the 100K, we would feel maybe a bit more committed to committed to the project. Have to fundraise. Maybe we could set up a fundraiser. I know YouTube has some kind of fundraising feature Although I'm not sure this counts as a charity. Get a Unix specification for the Serenity project. Anyway, let's see. Ali says we should just send someone to be part of Open Group. Maybe we could send Ali and then convince them to change the shell semantics. Let's see.
Like Linus joined the what is it? The JavaScript working group.
I think they're still working on that.
I see.
But as far as I know, it will happen. Like in my mind, it's already happened, obviously.
Yeah.
But, I think the issue there was that the person, you need to have a member sponsor you.
Yeah, I see.
And the person who's going to sponsor Linus was on sabbatical or something.
I see.
But yeah, we need to get people to infiltrate all of these different standardization things.
Yeah.
I looked up the Open Group a while ago, the folks who standardize POSIX, and they had like this web page where you see everybody who's working there, and I didn't recognize anybody, and it made me wonder, like, who are all these people? And that, I mean, that's not to say like they're a bunch of nobodies, obviously not. It's just that they're like this totally different dimension of people who control what Unix is, and I had never heard of any of them.
Yeah.
Which is...
It is conspiracy theory.
I'm sure we can come up with one. Yeah. No, but in all seriousness, if we had the cash magically, it would be cool to become an official Unix, obviously. But I don't think we're going to prioritize raising cash for that anytime soon.
Are there even that many Unixes? Well, Linux for sure does not have a certification. I think most of the BSDs aren't too interested in shelling out all that money. So who is Unix then? And why is that relevant when none of the bigger players in the OS field actually are POSIX?
I don't know. I don't want to talk too much out of my ass because I just don't know about this stuff. But I guess Apple is at least one certified Unix implementation, right? Mac OS. Let's see. Gabriel here was saying that he'd love to work on POSIX compatibility. Is there anything spectacularly non-compliant right now? Yes. Yes, absolutely. Lots of stuff. You can pick, if you throw a dart into the userland directory, you'll probably hit something non-compliant. But there's a lot of stuff that is compliant. It's just that I don't know if we have anything that's 100%. Maybe the first part, if anybody wanted to approach that in a systematic way, the first thing would be to just do a survey and figure out, like, what are the utilities? How is our POSIX compliance coverage look like? Which options are implemented and so on. Make like a nice spreadsheet or something out of it. Spreadsheet, or not spreadsheet, but like making a graph of something has been absolutely wonderful for the libjs project. I think there's a magical feedback loop between programmers and graphs. And if you can give a programmer a graph and he has some autonomy to make the graph go up, then magic happens. And if we had a graph of our POSIX compatibility by whatever metric, like, I know we don't have their test, but we could come up with our own test. I feel like that could be a thing. And I know it would work on me. Like, I would work towards that. Anyway, Gabriel is also saying here that the mailing list is open and they have meetings on Zoom every week. See, so I just don't know shit about POSIX standardization. It sounds like they are open, like the Open Group. Although I guess I maintain that I think they should still not have a closed test suite. Supposedly they're standardizing GNU get text. Cool. That sounds like a thing.
It's possible that they do provide the test suite to open source projects for free, but they just have to guard it so that they can get moolah from companies to keep them as operating, like some sort of revenue, maybe.
Very possible. Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm veering into the territory of talking out of my ass here. Like, I just want to say stuff, but I know that I shouldn't because I don't know.
I have a vague memory of somebody working on POSIX compatibility for like Dragonfly BSD. I think like this was like 12 years ago or something, but I believe they had access to the test suite. So I think there might be a way to get access.
Yeah, we should find this out. And oh, now I did that thing where I said we should do something. What I meant to say is I'm going to try to find this out. And if anybody knows about that, please find me after the show. And it sounds like Gabriel here knows a lot about it. He says the meetings are also open. You literally just need to sign up. So I think I'm literally just going to sign up to that. And I would invite anyone else who's interested to do that. And maybe we could raid the POSIX meetings. Maybe we could go to them here on YouTube live. Or maybe not. I take that back. Never mind. Let's see. That Chris says Unix certification used to be a requirement to sell to the U.S. government.
Wait,
I imagine
Unix, not POSIX. Wasn't POSIX the one? Because those two are slightly different, right? They don't really mean the same thing. So
they might be different. I don't know. I feel like
I just read somewhere, but maybe Gabriel will correct
I was gonna say.
if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I feel like Gabriel is just gonna tell us the facts anyway. So let's just
wait for that.
Wait for that. Yeah.
It looks like the Open Group has a Unix certification program as well. So you can get certified as a Unix. So I think this makes sense for like HPUX and like all the kind of old school Unices before POSIX was maybe standardized, or like you had like a different subset of things that you could guarantee you supported, so that if you sold somebody like a mainframe with an OS or something, they could have a guarantee that they could compile their operating system or their system software for that system if they're going to use it. Yeah,
exactly. Good times. Let's see. Wow, people are just dropping facts here. Like that Chris listing the Unix certified systems. Nice. People are so educated, or like really good at binging things on Google. Anyway. Jessica says the graphs are the programmer's version of nerd sniping. I thought nerd sniping was the programmer's version of nerd sniping. I feel like graphs are more like the technical manager. That's sort of their gun that they use for nerd sniping. But I don't know. Like, do you have graphs for your stuff at work, Brian? Like, do you work in a graph workflow?
Yeah, I mean, we work. I work on a database, so we're pretty like, obviously data centric a little bit. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's kind of kind of burned down database things that we're kind of tracking.
Yeah. All of my corporate jobs have been the same. Like it's all graphs every day. Like there's always some graph that you're chasing. Even like on your most casual days, there's still like, well, you have these bugs and your bug priority distribution looks like this and so on. And well, it's a good thing. I don't know how it's been going with libjs. I feel like we had good progress on libjs for a long time, and then it kind of plateaued a little bit. We need to figure out what's necessary to get to the 100%, obviously.
I kind of like that though, that kind of part of Serenity, and like people see a thing, like a group emerges, people work together, and then they can go work on something else, or kind of people migrated to other parts of the system, or kind of come back every once in a while. I don't know. I like that there's incentive for collaboration, and kind of there's a lot of collaboration and working on a common goal, but then it can quickly dissipate and move somewhere else. I think it's kind of cool how liquid and flexible it is.
Yeah, very much so. And it makes me wonder if we could sort of help that workflow, like facilitate it by making it easier to create these like temporary collaboration environments where, like right now, if you wanted to start graphing something, I know Linus, who set up libjs.dev, for example, like it's like a separate web server where he does some stuff that produces the graph and all that. And if we had some kind of common infrastructure for like, oh, well, if you want to add a graph, you just need to do this or that sort of thing. I definitely feel like I wouldn't know where to start exactly, and maybe that's holding me back from doing this for some things. Because, like, for example, right now I've been working on the self-hosted Yakt compiler, and I have a shell script that runs all the tests, and it prints out like the number of passing and failing tests at the end. And it would be nice to have that as a graph, but there isn't like an obvious path forward. Like, oh, here's how you plug that into something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is just my extended form of yak baiting the audience by describing something that would be cool to have. But we'll see how that goes. Let's see. Gabriel saying again here, when someone asks what I do for a living, I say I write rainbow text and move cards from one column to the other, and the numbers go up. I think you just described like 80% of people's careers in the audience. At least that's this is very similar to jobs I've had. But it feels good when the number goes up, so I don't really have a problem with any of it. Let's see. My name says, didn't Linus implement some data gathering stuff for his hosted Serenity box online? Not sure what its name was. Yes, he did. He made a video about that. That was called something. And I'm sure that we could figure out what that was. But yeah, Linus was doing something for that. Let's see. Network exception says, did I hear libgraph? Well, you hear what you want to hear. I'm just here. I'm just talking. Network exception is it's kind of a tool master. I like that. Like always making these Discord bots and stuff. Anyway, let's get back on track. Do we have any good questions here to start talking about? I guess we can talk to Thomas, who was saying the whole thing of re-implementing lower level, more complex software like libjs or the graphical shell, etc., that Serenity does is super cool. It's one of my favorite things to do. So obviously, it's one of my favorite things to do as well. I like to build a whole stack. But you guys, I don't know if you are. Like, would you say that, like, since working on Serenity, you've sort of expanded your view of what you like to work on, or have you sort of stayed true to your original self? Like, you have your domain and you like to stick to it?
I think I've expanded my interest a little bit. Like, I was pretty focused on the kernel for a while and like kind of libc and that kind of thing. But I don't know. I like dabbling in other areas and helping with like these kind of common efforts. I enjoy the camaraderie, that kind of thing. So I think that definitely helps me kind of pull me in and kind of get me interested in other areas. But yeah.
So for me, I think I still have some hard limits. So I just cannot bring myself to touch any of the GUI stuff. That's just too much for me. I like to be as far from the user as possible. So for me, the only interesting thing is data. Anything other than that, that's not my job.
All right. Well,
I know it's not the most healthy view of the things to have, but it, I think, requires a completely different way of thinking. When interactions are asynchronous, you don't want to block the UI thread, and you have to worry about all sorts of things to make the whole system work. While as a more lower level programmer, you can just start thinking about smaller pieces of code and go one function at a time.
Okay. Well, I'm sure that you have plenty of time to open your mind to buttons and checkboxes and stuff, but there's no rush. Let's see. Linus was saying that Ali already made the original libjs progress graph website generic for libwasm. You can plug in any data easily, just beads to match the format. All right. Well, it shows what I know. I guess I can just go and plug it in. Maybe I'll just do that. Let's see. Oh, what do we got here? Kook says that they can't focus at all if I watch Andreas hacking while I'm trying to hack myself. Yeah, I don't blame you. Like, as much as I enjoy making the videos, I can't watch other people talking and programming at the same time while I'm trying to program. I don't know how so many people do it. Like, how can you watch me while doing anything? But everybody's different, right? Do you guys watch any kind of like, can you watch programming content while doing work yourself?
No, I mean, if I do, I'll tab and have it in the background as like white noise or whatever. I can actually focus on what's happening there at all.
So I can't even really listen to music while I'm working on something. It just gets too distracted. Most of the time I end up, let's just relax while I'm working. I put on some music, and 2 minutes later I already reach for my phone to just turn it down or make it shut up, because I just cannot focus and I don't hear my own thoughts. So no, watching you hack, Andreas, that's definitely not a I want to be productive too activity.
Yeah.
Although afterwards I get a huge boost to seeing that you zoom through all those changes in a short amount of time. That's a huge motivation for me. And this is why I was very excited to see the new browser hacking video from you.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah, that's like me in my comfort zone. I can work fast, get a lot of stuff done. So that was fun. Actually, I wanted to ask you, Brian, because I saw you did a PR this morning, and we haven't talked about it at all. But you were looking at this auto initialization of variables thing. Could you tell us a bit about that? What that is?
So it's actually a very long-standing thing that I've been working on and off for probably half a year at this point. It's a very small change now, but it had a lot of background. But so the kind of industry has admitted to itself that uninitialized variables are bad, and kind of all of the compilers have started adopting exporting some sort of flag to let you control code generation to automatically initialize like local stack variables, for example. And so there's different approaches. So like the first kind of thing you think of is like, oh, we'll just zero initialize all the variables and that'll be fine. But there's different thoughts or schools of thought, kind of. So some people think that like, depending on the data type, zero initializing might not be the best thing. It might not be like the best thing for security. And so there's kind of another approach where you have a pattern-based initialization, where there's kind of like a pattern hard-coded for each data type, or like a pattern created for each data type during startup of the compiler. And so the whole idea is essentially is kind of like nuke uninitialized variables as a bug class, because like in kernel code, it can cause an information disclosure where like if you don't initialize a member of a struct or even the padding of a struct, and then you copy that struct to user mode, then you can potentially leak information about the kernel to user mode, and attacker can use that to gain knowledge that can help them exploit the system further, right? They could pair it with another exploit to go, if they have like an arbitrary read or an arbitrary write, and they can leak information via an info disclosure, they can use that together to kind of attack a specific part of memory that they know exists because they were able to glean information about it from that info disclosure. And then also just, I mean, uninitialized variables can have obvious bugs, like with like flow control, where you're testing a Boolean condition and it happens to be garbage. So you go down some path and it ends up kind of catastrophically blowing up. So I think for like the sensitivity and kind of the security mindset that we try to approach, especially the kernel, right? It makes sense to kind of enable this and kind of try to rule out that bug class entirely. It's not a huge issue in our kernel because I think we do use a lot of like C++ type objects, right? Which we are pretty careful about initializing all the member variables and everything. But I and other folks have found a bunch of kind of info disclosures over the life of the project, right? That we've cleaned up, and I think this might help to kind of ease our minds and make the kernel a little bit more hardened.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting that it took such a long time for the like you say, the industry convincing itself that this is actually an issue. Because I remember also finding these issues, and like I actually spent some time like making an exploit that would sort of exfiltrate data from the kernel via one of these things, and it's tedious, but it is possible, right? And you mentioned struct padding, like, so this actually zeroes out or initializes the entire struct, including padding, right?
Yep.
So yeah, so then it becomes like completely predictable. It's very nice.
So this was landed in GCC maybe the end of last year. I think it was like October or November of 2021. And so at that time, I started porting all of that to our toolchain because I wanted to turn it on as soon as possible. And so I went through the process of patching the patches to match backport it essentially to GCC 11, which we were using at that time. And then I ran into some bugs. And I worked on like making reproducers and trying to fix the bug. And I think it was a real bug in GCC because after this commit was merged to GCC, there was maybe 5 or 6 follow-up commits to fix other code generation bugs that it was causing. So I worked on finding those in the GCC code and backporting them as well. And then eventually I got to the point where I could boot the kernel, but then it would crash, where we have this code which does CPU flag detection, and then we have like a lambda that does setting all the bits on the enum bit mask of like all the CPU features. And something about that lambda was causing ASAN or UBISAN to get flagged on the zero initialization. So like UBISAN in the auto variable init were conflicting, and UBISAN was crashing. So I never got to the bottom of that, and that's where I left it for a while. And then Daniel was awesome enough to upgrade our toolchain when GCC 12 came out, and so I was finally able to get this now very small patch to just turn on the compiler flag merged. And it turns it on for Clang and GCC. They both support the same compile flag.
And is there any reason that we don't do this for everything? We only do it for the kernel right now?
So, I mean, there is kind of a potential. You are doing more things, right? You're running more code gen and initializing variables that potentially don't need to be initialized because you're initializing them later. So I kind of wanted to take a more conservative approach at first, right, and see how it works out. I didn't see any noticeable perf impact in like our tests or anything, but I think it might make sense to kind of deploy it larger as we kind of test it out and make sure it works as expected.
Yeah, it seems like all in all really nice feature. It's been pretty quiet on like the security feature front in Serenity as of recent. Like we haven't had any big new things happening.
Yep. I think Eden just merged a fix to he found a kernel ASLR bypass, I think, where there's some instruction, I think, that you could read, or I think it was like GS related somehow, where like you could leak information into GS and you could read information about the kernel in user mode via GS, something like that.
That's a good thing to fix. Yeah, I guess the thing that happened last year, we didn't get any of those Christmas hacking attempts that we've been getting every other year before that. And that sort of threw me off a little bit because I like to have the year start with panicking about exploits and stuff.
Maybe we need to be more enticing or reach out to our security-minded friends.
We're getting too good. Time to put some intentional bugs in our code base.
Yeah. Or we can use that that technique where we like brag about how secure we are until somebody like wants to put us in our place.
That might be a good approach. Yeah.
Just need to make some obnoxious tweets about unbeatable security. Yeah, we'll see. No, but I think it would be awesome to get that train rolling again, because I do miss it. It's fun. I did try to raise the bug bounty reward. I do have the bug bounty program. I'm now offering $50, but still no takers. I guess I know I can't compete with like Google bug bounty programs and whatever. But, no, that would be fun, but we'll see. We'll see. Anyway, let's see. Thomas says that he remembers when Live Overflow did a SerenityOS video. That was super cool. It was super cool. We definitely got a whole bunch of security curious people dropping in around that time, and we had a lot of people trying to break the system. I remember. But I think maybe we just made it too secure. It's just it's not really hackable anymore, and yeah, they just move on to easier targets like Linux and stuff. Anyway, so we are actually like running out of time. I feel like if we want to wrap things up and talk about anything that we forgot, now is probably a good time to start that. I don't know exactly what that would be, but if nobody has a thing that's you've been aching to say, then we can also take a last question or two. And this is a great suggestion here. Gabriel's suggesting we're X days without a privilege escalation bug. Yeah. Could also try something like a bug bounty where every day the bounty goes up $1, right? And that would be kind of cool. We'll have to think about that. Roland says, does Serenity have workarounds for hardware security issues? Ooh, I guess we don't really. We don't safeguard against any kind of hardware failure. All of our mitigations are, like, our threat model does not include hardware failure or hardware security compromises.
Like every side channel attack probably is free game on Serenity as well.
Yeah, basically. Well, multi-core support is so bad that you're not gonna you're not gonna do any cache timing attacks.
That's true. Yeah.
Because we're just too secure. You can't hack us. No, that's definitely an area where we'll have to grow eventually. And I kind of tend to think of security is like a more fun proxy to stability. Like because everybody wants stability, but it sounds so boring to work on. Unless you are Brian, who loves stability. Most people hear stability and they just think like, oh, yeah, sure. But I want to do features. But I kind of think of security as this way to trick people into caring about stability, because security issues are very often stability issues, right? And I don't know how. I guess I need to convince myself to work on security again. It's just maybe that's what I'm doing, actually. I mean, I am working on building a memory safe language for the system. I guess that is the security. The whole motivation for it is that. Yeah, okay, fine. That was a stupid tangent. No, but I guess let's wrap it up. So it has been awesome to have you guys here. I know that the format was wild and new, but I really appreciate that you both came on and helped me answer all these questions. I feel like every week people come to the show and they hear me give all the same answers. Like, I don't have a plan. I don't have opinions about Zig. Like, I don't want to build a package manager. And now we got to hear something new. So thank you both so much for that. And I guess thank you to everybody who came and hung out as well. Have a great weekend, everybody. And as I like to say, if you end up working on Serenity this weekend, come hang out with us on Discord. Show Brian your screenshots. Ask Daniel about your crashes, and we will have some fun. See you all next time.